My husband adopted his ex's kids, expecting me to parent them all. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I already signed the papers, Daniel said, like he was telling me he'd picked up milk. He stood in our kitchen in his gray coat, one hand over a manila folder beside my coffee mug. I had just come home from the clinic, still smelling like hand sanitizer and muscle rub, and for one stupid second I thought he meant a refinance or a roof estimate. Then I saw the county seal, the words petition for adoption, and the room went cold. I'm Natalie, 34, a physical therapist at an outpatient rehab clinic. My work is pain, recovery, and consent. I spend all day teaching people how to trust their bodies again. I like plans. I like truth. I like when adults say what they mean before they change everyone else's life. I had built my marriage on the belief that Daniel did too. We'd been married 3 years. Before that, we had 2 serious conversations about children, one on a rainy drive back from Asheville, one sitting on our apartment floor surrounded by moving boxes. Both times Daniel said the same thing. If we ever change course, we decide together. I remembered those words because I trusted them like vows. Now there was a file on my counter with his ex-wife Marissa's name, his signature, and a note about an emergency hearing next Tuesday. He kept talking in that soft, reasonable voice he used when he wanted to sound noble. They need stability, he said. This moved faster than I expected. Who is that? He blinked. The kids, Nat. Marissa agreed. Their father signed off months ago. There wasn't time to keep circling the same conversation. Same conversation. As if my entire position on parenthood had been a scheduling inconvenience. I opened the folder with shaking fingers and found forms listing our address, our household income, and, on one page, me as supportive spouse, available for day-to-day care due to flexible schedule. I don't have a flexible schedule. My patients are booked every 45 minutes from 8 to 5. I looked up and Daniel actually said, almost tenderly, "Please don't make this harder than it already is." That was when I understood he hadn't just decided without me. He had already volunteered my whole life to prove what kind of man he was. The worst part was that if you had met Daniel before all this, you would have liked him. He remembered baristas' names, sent flowers when co-workers lost parents, and had a warmth that made people trust him fast. He worked in commercial real estate, wore expensive watches he pretended not to care about, and I took that polish as safety. He told me early that his marriage to Marissa had been complicated, but not ugly. She had 2 children from a previous relationship. He helped raise them for 6 years, then the marriage ended. He said he still checked in because children shouldn't lose adults just because adults failed each other. That sounded kind. What he also said, more than once, was that he was done being pushed into roles he hadn't chosen. I learned the hard way that care without boundaries hollows you out, he told me on our 3rd date. I remember relaxing when he said that because it matched something true in me. I never wanted children badly enough to make motherhood my whole identity. He said he didn't either. He said partnership should be chosen, not trapped by guilt. So I believed him. Our marriage looked good from the outside. Sunday bagels, Thursday takeout, a standing joke about my labeled pantry and his books arranged by color. He kissed my temple when I charted late from home. He called me steady, like it was praise. When friends asked about babies, he always answered first, "We're happy. We like our life." I didn't notice how much he enjoyed being admired for saying that. There had been one warning I dismissed. About a year into our marriage, we ran into Marissa at a pharmacy. She looked exhausted, and Daniel instantly changed, softer, urgent, indispensable. He paid for the kids' antibiotics before she asked. In the car, I said, "You still feel responsible for them?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Someone has to." It wasn't the words that bothered me. It was the pride inside them. I asked if he wanted more involvement, and he laughed. "Nat, no. Helping occasionally isn't the same as starting a whole life over." I heard reassurance. What I should have heard was rehearsal. By the time I understood the difference, he had already made me part of the script. The first real argument happened 20 minutes after he dropped the folder on the counter. I asked the simplest question first because I still thought maybe there had been some bureaucratic mistake. "What exactly did you sign?" Daniel folded his arms. "A petition to become their legal adoptive parent. The hearing moves temporary placement into our home while the last review clears." "Our home," I repeated, without asking me. He exhaled hard. "I did ask you." "No. You floated emotional hypotheticals whenever Marissa had a crisis. That is not the same as telling your wife you filed adoption paperwork. He hated precision. It left him less room to perform. He switched from defensive to wounded in seconds. I didn't blindside you for fun. Marissa's landlord gave her notice. The kids have been missing school. Their biological father terminated rights in January. There was a window to give them stability, and I took it. A window for you, not for me. He stepped closer, voice lower, as if calmness made him right. Natalie, these are not random children. I helped raise them. They know me. And what am I supposed to be? Because the form in that folder already has an answer. His jaw tightened. My partner. That is not a job description. He laughed once. Why are you making this sound ugly? Because it was ugly. Not the children. The planning. The signatures. The hearing date. The way I was suddenly unreasonable for objecting after the fact. I asked whether Marissa knew I hadn't agreed. He didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Daniel. She knows we're a stable household. That's not what I asked. He looked annoyed now. What did you want me to tell her? That my wife needed time to decide whether 2 children were too inconvenient? There it was. If I said no, I was cruel. If I hesitated, I was selfish. If I asked for honesty, I was delaying a rescue. I said, very quietly, you are using urgency to erase my consent. He shook his head. I'm asking you to be a decent human being. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down, and I saw Marissa's name before he flipped it over. The preview was only 6 words, but it changed everything. Did you tell Natalie about mornings with them yet? I wish I could say I drew a line immediately. I didn't. That still embarrasses me. Daniel left early the next morning without discussing the text. At 6:18 a.m., while I was brushing my teeth, he called and said, too casually, can you do me a favor? Marissa had a rough night. The kids need to be dropped at school. Just today? Just today lasted 11 weeks. At first it came wrapped in gratitude. He brought home Thai noodles and said, you saved the day. He kissed my forehead in front of the kids and told them, Natalie is the organized one. I drove them to school twice that first week, then 3 times the next. Daniel had early meetings. Marissa was handling paperwork. The younger one forgot lunch. The older one had a panic attack before math. I told myself this was triage, not a life. Then clothes appeared in our laundry room. Toothbrushes in the guest bath. Prescription bottles beside my vitamins. A backpack landed by the front door and never left. Daniel started saying, they feel calmer here, and you're so good at this. He was never the one actually volunteering. Mornings became serial, missing sneakers, permission slips, and getting 2 scared children into a car by 7:20. Evenings became reheated pasta, homework at my table, one child crying because she missed her mom, the other pretending he didn't care until he slammed a cabinet. Daniel arrived around 8 with takeout or ice cream, did 20 bright minutes of comfort, then whispered later, I know this is a lot, but they're settling because of you. At the clinic, I started switching lunch breaks to answer school calls. I rescheduled 2 patients when the younger one spiked a fever. Daniel called that what family does. When I asked how often he planned to leave me alone with responsibilities he had chosen, he opened a bottle of wine and said, can we not turn every hard thing into a referendum on our marriage? One Friday, I came home and found both kids asleep on our couch, an overnight bag by the stairs, and Daniel smiling like he had solved something. Marissa needs the weekend, he said. I told her we've got them. He said we so easily I almost questioned my own memory. Then I saw the school folder with my signature forged on it. I knew my signature was wrong before I even picked up the form. Mine is narrow, slanted, and impatient, years of charting squeezed into loops. The signature on the school folder looked like Daniel trying to write me from memory. Same letters, wrong rhythm. I waited until the kids were asleep and carried the folder into our bedroom. It held an emergency contact card, a medication authorization form, and a transportation release. My name was listed first on every page. Not Daniel. Not Marissa. Me. When Daniel came upstairs, I laid the papers on the bed and asked, did you sign these for me? He loosened his tie and barely glanced down. It was easier. I actually laughed. Easier for who? For everyone. They needed the forms back. You were at work. So you forged my signature and told the school I was primary contact. He pinched the bridge of his nose like I was the inconvenience. The school needed one reliable adult during the day. Marissa's phone gets shut off half the time. I'm in meetings. You are the obvious person. The obvious person, I repeated. Because I answer my phone? Because you decided my labor belongs to this? He snapped then, not loudly, but with that control he used when he wanted me to feel childish. Because you are the adult in this house who doesn't disappear when things get hard. That landed exactly where he meant it to. He saw my face and softened immediately. He touched my wrist and lowered his voice. I'm sorry about the signature, he said, but I need you to stop treating every administrative detail like a moral injury. Administrative detail. The next morning, I checked our joint account. On March 4th, there was an $8,400 wire transfer to Jordan Pike Family Law. Daniel had never mentioned it. On March 11th, another charge, $1,275 to Green Psychological Services, the required family assessment. On March 18th, $642 for expedited filing. I stood in the staff bathroom staring at my banking app, while a hairdryer roared 2 sinks over and realized this had never been a crisis response. Crises don't come with itemized planning spread across 3 weeks and forged signatures. It was a campaign, and I had found the first receipt. That afternoon, the school office thanked me for my flexibility. Once Daniel realized money and paperwork weren't enough to shut me down, he changed strategies. He made it about my character. When I said I hadn't agreed to be primary caregiver, he didn't argue facts anymore. He argued morality. They've already been through enough. You're the safest person in the room. I can't believe I have to explain compassion to my own wife. He never raised his voice. If I cried, I looked volatile. If I got quiet, he looked patient. The kids were observant. One night the younger one asked me, while I brushed knots out of her damp hair, "Are you mad that we're here?" I swallowed hard. "No," I said, because she deserved safety more than honesty from me. "I'm mad at grown-ups who should have explained things better." She nodded like that made perfect sense, which somehow made it worse. Daniel started telling people a version of the story that made him sound brave and me sound overwhelmed but salvageable. At a cookout at his colleague's house, I came back from the bathroom and heard him say, "That's adjusting." She didn't picture this, but deep down she has a huge heart. Everyone smiled at me like I was a reluctant saint. No one asked whether I had been consulted. Even my hesitation began to sound ugly in my own head. I would be driving to school with one kid half asleep in the back seat and think, maybe adulthood is just accepting the role that appears in front of you. I called Priya from the clinic parking lot one Tuesday after Daniel told me I was withholding warmth from children in crisis. I said, "Tell me if I'm losing perspective." She asked one question. "Did you agree to this?" "No." "Then your perspective is the only sane thing in the room." I cried so fast I had to sit down on the curb. I told her about the forged forms, the bank transfers, the way Daniel kept calling my resistance cruelty. When I finished, she said, very evenly, "This is not generosity. This is conscription." The word was so precise it felt like oxygen. That night, Daniel found me screenshotting our account history and asked what I was doing. I should have lied. Instead, I said, "I'm trying to understand how long you've been setting me up." His face changed in a way I had never seen before. Then he asked who else I had told. After that, I stopped trying to win arguments and started collecting facts. Daniel had spent weeks teaching me that any emotional objection I raised could be reframed as selfishness. Fine. Facts were harder to gaslight. The first thing I found was careless. Daniel used our shared desktop to print school calendars. He usually logged out of everything. One Saturday, he left a browser window open behind a baseball score. A Gmail account I had never seen sat in the corner. Care Team 72. The inbox preview showed an attorney invoice, 3 emails from Marissa, and one subject line that made my chest tighten: updated caregiving schedule for Natalie. I didn't open anything yet. I took photos with my phone, went to the garage, and sat in my car until my breathing settled. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I opened the desktop again. The account was still active. I know some people will judge me for reading it. I judged myself too for about 30 seconds, and then I remembered the forged school forms with my name on them. One from Jordan, the family lawyer, dated March 2nd. "Please confirm household support plan for temporary placement." Daniel replied the same day. "My wife Natalie handles mornings and after-school structure due to her flexible clinical schedule. She is on board, just anxious about transition language." Transition language. Another thread between Daniel and Marissa discussed school pickups. Marissa wrote, "I need to know Natalie is really okay doing weekdays." Daniel answered, "She'll come around once the kids are here. She's resistant to the label, not the reality." There were attachments too. A draft household budget. Therapy recommendations. A school counselor's note saying the children needed predictable routines and low-conflict caregivers. Daniel had forwarded that line to Marissa with one sentence. "Nat is best at routines. This can actually work." At 1:14 a.m., I sent every document to a new email Priya helped me create. I thought the hidden account was the whole story. Then I saw the reimbursement spreadsheet. And that was when I understood Marissa had been promised much more than weekdays. The spreadsheet was titled Transition Support and color-coded like an office project. It listed dates from March through August, then expenses, rent bridge, school uniforms, therapy copays, after-school fees, gas, groceries. A note column explained how the arrangement would work. April 7th, Natalie to handle mornings until attachment stabilizes. April 14th, Natalie can supervise PT-recommended exercises after school. April 20th, if school questions arise, frame home is consistent with Natalie managing weekday structure. I read that line 4 times. PT-recommended exercises. One of the children had mild scoliosis and had been given a home exercise plan by a pediatric therapist. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel had sat in my clinic break room and casually asked what stretches kids usually do for spine asymmetry. I thought he was making conversation. He had been gathering language to sound competent in a plan that volunteered my profession. Farther down was a PDF from Marissa, probably for Jordan, before one of their meetings. The key paragraph said, "Daniel confirmed his wife is willing to be the stable weekday parent because her schedule is more adaptable than his. I will remain involved, but Natalie understands mornings, school communication, and most appointments will run through their home during transition. Willing. Understands. Most appointments." My name sat there in neat black letters inside a life I had never agreed to enter. That was when the whole thing stopped feeling like emotional chaos and started feeling contractual. Daniel had not merely assumed I would help. He had represented my unpaid labor as a settled asset to secure trust, sympathy, and legal momentum. I called Priya from the grocery store parking lot because I was afraid I might throw up in aisle 7. She listened, then said, "Save every single thing and stop confronting him without backup." What if Marissa really believed him? I asked. "She probably did," Priya said. "That doesn't make this smaller. It makes it bigger." I sat there staring at a bag of melting spinach on the passenger seat, realizing 2 women might have been lied to in different directions. Then Daniel texted me from upstairs. "Can you grab children's Tylenol and more shampoo while you're out?" For a few days I told myself the motive didn't matter. The lying was enough. The forged forms were enough. The hidden email was enough. But motive matters when you're trying to understand how far someone will go. I found his in a voicemail he didn't know had synced to our tablet. Daniel had been on a call with his business mentor, a man he used whenever he wanted sympathy wrapped in strategy. The voicemail was accidental, just the tail end after Daniel thought he'd hung up. "I'm not going to be the guy who walked away twice," he said. "Not after everything with Marissa, and with the board looking at regional leadership next quarter. People notice who you are at home. This lets me clean up an old narrative and do the right thing." Then, after a pause, softer and uglier, "Natalie will resist the wording, but once it's active, she'll handle the day-to-day. She always does." There it was. Not just rescue. Image. Reputation. A polished redemption arc with my labor hidden inside it. He wanted to be the man who stepped up, the man who never abandoned children, the man whose personal life looked worthy of promotion and warm for praise. He wanted the halo and private outsourcing. Once I saw that, other details snapped into place. Hosting colleagues for dinner. Pancake breakfast photos that never showed who found the inhaler or sat through nightmares. The way he told people I was adjusting beautifully, as if I were staff learning a new software system. I searched the hidden email again and found a message to Jordan marked confidential. Daniel wrote, "It is important that the court understands our home has 2 adults, but only one of us can provide consistent weekday structure. Natalie's temperament is ideal for children with routines and health needs. I can provide financial stability and paternal continuity." Temperament. I wasn't a wife in that sentence. I was infrastructure. That night, Daniel came up behind me while I packed lunches and slid his arms around my waist as if nothing had changed. "You've been distant," he said. "I need you with me on this." I kept my hands on the counter because I no longer trusted myself not to shake. Then he whispered the sentence that made my choice unavoidable. "If you love me, stop making me do this alone." He tried kindness before he tried intimidation. For 3 days, Daniel was the version of himself I had fallen for. He made coffee before I woke up. He picked up dinner without asking because he already knew my order. He even took both kids to the park on Saturday and texted me, "Rest. You deserve it." If I hadn't seen the emails, it might have worked. On Sunday, he invited Marissa and the kids over for dinner so we can all stop feeling tense. I almost refused, but Priya said, "Manipulative people count on private confusion. Go see what story he's telling out loud." So I went. Daniel grilled chicken in the backyard, while Marissa folded napkins at my kitchen table like she had done it before. She looked tired, embarrassed, and weirdly grateful toward me, which made my stomach twist. At one point, she touched my arm and said, "I know this hasn't been easy, but Daniel keeps saying you're the stable one. I really appreciate what you're doing." I said, carefully, "Has Daniel ever told you I agreed to be weekday parent?" Her face changed. Not dramatically, just one small pause too long. "He said you two had worked it out," she said. That was the first crack. Dinner was all performance. Daniel serving plates. Daniel asking about spelling tests. Daniel telling the kids to thank me for keeping mornings smooth. I could feel myself slipping toward that old dangerous thought. Maybe I should absorb this quietly until the court date passes, then set limits later. Then the younger one knocked over her water and burst into tears. Both Marissa and I moved at the same time. Daniel froze, holding barbecue tongs, waiting for the actual adult to step in. And suddenly I could see the whole scam in one image. The women doing repair. Daniel narrating himself as the man who cared. After dessert, his phone lit up on the counter with a calendar alert. Jordan call refinalization optics. Not placement. Optics. Later, when I said I wanted to postpone the hearing until everyone told the truth, Daniel followed me into the bedroom and shut the door softly. "You don't get to blow this up now," he said. And for the first time, he locked the door behind him. I don't remember much about that locked door conversation except the clarity I felt afterward. Daniel talked for 20 minutes without saying anything different. He said timing was delicate. He said the kids would feel abandoned if I created instability now. He said every family survives things that didn't arrive the way they expected. Then, when that didn't work, he asked if I wanted to be responsible for humiliating everyone in front of the court. By the time he left for work the next morning, I was done negotiating with his image. Priya came over with a legal pad and 2 iced coffees. We sat at my dining table while the kids were at school and built a timeline. March 2nd, Daniel emails Jordan saying I am on board and available for weekday care. March 4th, $8,400 retainer from our joint account to Jordan Pike Family Law. March 11th, $1,275 family assessment charge. March 18th, forged school forms filed listing me as primary contact. March 22nd, Marissa asks whether I am really okay doing weekdays. Daniel replies, "She'll come around once the kids are here." April 7th through May 30th, my calendar shows 23 school drop-offs, 9 early pickups, for clinic schedule changes, 3 pediatric appointments, and 1 overnight fever I handled alone. Priya told me to get independent confirmation anywhere I could. I called the school and asked for copies of forms naming me as contact. School office emailed them within 15 minutes. I also called Jordan's office and said, very evenly, "I need to understand what representations were made in paperwork involving my name." He wouldn't discuss strategy, but he did confirm there would be a pre-hearing family conference Thursday at 4:30 with all involved adults present. Perfect. That night, I downloaded the voicemail, exported the hidden emails, printed the spreadsheet, and photographed the forged signatures beside my real one. I also saved texts where Daniel asked me to cover pickups while telling Marissa he had weekday structure handled. At 11:07 p.m., Marissa left me a voicemail. Her tone was guarded but shaky. "I think we need to talk without Daniel," she said. "There are a few things he told me that aren't lining up anymore." For the first time, I knew exactly where the truth needed to come out. The family conference was held in Jordan's office. Glass table. Daniel wore navy. Marissa twisted a tissue in both hands. I brought a folder thick enough that Jordan glanced at it twice before sitting down. At first, Daniel ran the meeting the way he ran everything: warm, composed, burdened by other people's emotions. He talked about continuity, attachment, school stability, and our shared commitment to minimizing disruption. Every time he said our, I went colder. Jordan turned to me eventually. "Natalie, is there anything you'd like to add?" I said yes. Then I opened the folder. I started with the forged school forms because they were simplest. I placed the transportation release beside a document I had signed the same week and said, "This is not my signature." Daniel submitted 3 forms naming me primary contact without my permission. Jordan leaned forward. Marissa stopped twisting the tissue. Next came the bank statements. March 4th, March 11th, March 18th. I named the amounts out loud. Then I slid printed emails across the table. Daniel telling Jordan I was on board. Daniel telling Marissa I would handle weekdays. Daniel describing my clinical schedule as flexible. Daniel writing that my temperament was ideal for children with routines and health needs. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. He tried to interrupt twice. This is being taken out of context. Natalie is angry and choosing the least charitable reading possible. Jordan told him to wait. So I kept going. I played the voicemail from the tablet. The room filled with Daniel's voice. "This lets me clean up an old narrative and do the right thing. Natalie will resist the wording, but once it's active, she'll handle the day-to-day. She always does." Silence. Marissa looked at Daniel like she had never seen him before. "You told me she agreed," she said. Daniel turned to me and said, low and wounded, "You would rather publicly humiliate me than help 2 children who need us." "No," I said. "I would rather tell the truth than keep being assigned a life I never consented to." His mask slipped thin, fast and ugly. "For God's sake, Natalie, not everything is about your feelings." Jordan set his pen down at that. And that was the moment Daniel finally lost the room. The fallout started before we even left the parking garage. Marissa caught up to me by the elevator. "Did you know he told Jordan I was unstable enough to need supervision?" she asked. I turned around. "What?" She laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. "That was his backup. If I hesitated, he was going to argue the children needed your house full-time because mine was too chaotic." She wiped at her eyes. "He told me you were the one thing making this possible." We stood there for 10 minutes comparing versions. Daniel had told Marissa I was fully committed but emotionally sensitive about labels. He had told me Marissa understood this as temporary support. In reality, Marissa thought she was agreeing to a gradual transition with me as weekday parent and herself reduced to weekends until she was stable. I thought I was surviving a short emergency. Daniel had built the gap on purpose. Jordan called later that evening to say the hearing would be postponed pending corrected disclosures. Words like misrepresentation and material omission showed up in his sentences now. The school removed me as primary contact that same night after I emailed copies of the forged signatures. Daniel did not come home until after midnight. When he did, he skipped apology entirely. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," he said from the doorway, like that was the injury worth naming. "You forged my signature." He threw his keys so hard they skidded into the fruit bowl. "I was trying to solve a problem." "No," I said. "You were trying to assign one." He slept in the guest room. The next morning, I went to work after 2 hours of sleep and nearly cried because a stroke patient asked why I looked tired. My supervisor asked whether I needed personal days. I said no because I no longer knew which parts of my life were still structurally sound. Friends split fast once the story widened. Some said Daniel had handled it badly, but meant well. Priya said process is how adults keep other adults from being used up in the name of goodness. Marissa texted me just before midnight. "You were right to tell the truth. I'm sorry I helped him corner you." Then Daniel's mother called and left a voicemail I will never forget. She said I was tearing a family apart over paperwork. I moved out 3 days later. Not in a dramatic movie way. No screaming on the lawn. I packed scrubs, jeans, my laptop, 2 framed photos, and the Dutch oven my grandmother gave me. Priya met me after work and helped me load everything while Daniel was at the office. I left a note on the counter that said, "I will not continue any caregiving arrangement built through fraud, coercion, or assumption. Future contact about finances or property must be in writing." For 2 weeks, I rented a furnished studio near the clinic and slept like someone recovering from a fever. The first morning I woke up without listening for small footsteps or missing shoes. I cried so hard I had to sit on the shower floor. My body had been bracing for impact and had not realized it was allowed to stop. I did not punish the children for what Daniel had done. With Jordan copied, I sent one clear email. I would not serve as transportation contact, weekday caregiver, or medical decision-maker. I was willing to participate in one supervised transition conversation if the children needed closure and if their mother was present. No informal asks. No emergency assumptions. No using my profession or schedule in any legal document ever again. Daniel replied with 6 paragraphs of self-pity. He said I was abandoning vulnerable children to score a point in a marital dispute. He said my language of consent was cold and clinical. He said love requires inconvenience. I sent back one sentence. Love also requires permission. Then I separated our finances. The bank froze further transfers from our joint account, pinning both signatures. I opened a new checking account, redirected my paycheck, and documented every family law charge Daniel had taken from shared funds. A week later, Marissa asked if we could meet for coffee. She looked exhausted, but clearer. She said she was arranging after-school care and moving in temporarily with her sister while housing stabilized. I should have asked you directly, she said. I wanted his certainty to be real. So did I told her. We sat there in silence for a while, 2 women grieving different versions of the same man. That evening, Daniel emailed one final accusation. He wrote that I was teaching the children women always leave. It has been 8 months since Daniel said, I already signed the papers, and dropped a future on my kitchen counter like it was an errand. Marriage is over. The divorce paperwork is boring in the way painful things eventually become. Dates, disclosures, account balances, who keeps the dining table. Daniel still writes emails that sound like closing arguments for his own decency. I stopped answering anything that is not logistical. Silence can be a boundary too. The children are with Marissa full-time now while she lives with her sister. There is after-school care, transportation plans, and fewer adults pretending certainty where there isn't any. I saw them once in a supervised goodbye at a park, exactly the way I said I would. The younger one hugged me hard around the waist. The older one looked at the ground and said, I know this wasn't your fault. I held it together until I got back to my car. For a while, I was ashamed of how angry I still felt. But therapy taught me something I wish I had known earlier. Anger is often the part of you that still believes you deserve protection. Mine wasn't asking me to be cruel. It was asking me to stop disappearing. So that is what I did. I took extra shifts for a month and then stopped taking extra anything. I bought myself sunflowers every Friday for no reason except I liked them on my table. I stopped apologizing for sentences that begin with I did not agree. Priya and I started walking the Greenway on Sunday mornings instead of me cleaning a house full of obligations I never chose. My apartment is small, bright, and ordinary. Sometimes I stand in the kitchen making one person's dinner and feel an almost holy level of peace. That is the hopeful image, I guess. Not Daniel ruined and me triumphant. Just me, barefoot on a clean floor, stirring soup I only have to season for myself. No one mistaking my competence for consent. If someone you love keeps volunteering you for roles you never chose, please hear me. Confusion is not consent. Guilt is not consent. Being good at care is not consent. And love that depends on your silence is not love that will keep you safe. The last thing Daniel ever accused me of was leaving. He was wrong. I was the first person in that house who finally stayed with myself.